Hello, my name is David Eaton and I'm a lecturer here at the City of Glasgow College in New Media Art. I'd like to discuss the creative potential of AI in this talk, which is entitled The Sentient Being, a Response to Artificial Intelligence in Art and Design Education. It's a high-level overview of the implications and possibilities for these disciplines. It is very much at an early stage in its thinking, and the purpose here is to foster some debate rather than offer too many solutions. I make no claims to being an expert in AI and have just started to investigate its potential. However, I do bring the experience of over 25 years of thinking about the role that the computer has within the creative arts. I would like to start with some historical context in thinking about art education and technology by referencing a visionary paper called Network as Artwork, The Future of Visual Arts Education, written in 1978 by Roy Ascott, the cybernetic artist and educator. In this, he not only envisaged a world of interdisciplinary practice and global connectivity, but also understood that art education should be behavioural and non-deterministic, and it should foster feedback through social engagement. It is his behaviourist, cybernetic views that underpins one of my approaches to thinking about AI and art and design. Another influence is how we have approached the idea of thinking machines since the 1950s, and what AI is and is not. The first of these we can call strong AI, or artificial general intelligence, where we assume the machine can have human level intelligence and consciousness. This is really only the stuff of science fiction, philosophical debate and cognitive research. In reality, we've yet to achieve strong AI, and it would be a brave prediction to say that we ever will. The second method we call an expert system, where we try and work out all of the rules for human intelligence and then program this. This was the dominant approach till the 1990s. However, today, most of the excitement in AI is in what we call artificial neural networks, where we train a computer on data and then run this through the algorithm to achieve the desired results. This approach was pioneered by Arthur Samuels in 1959, and he created this definition of what we now call machine learning. Field of study that gives computers the ability to learn without being explicitly programmed. An example of this in art can be seen here, where a computer has painted me in the style of Van Gogh after it had been trained on the style of his artworks and approaches to his painting. A third influence on my thinking is the familiar debate on whether we can consider computers to be creative. There is currently lots of excitement about machine learning in art, with, for example, machines that can compose music that is indistinguishable from that made by a human. Another example is the recent artwork Edmund and Bellamy, entirely made by a machine and sold for £335,000 at Sotheby's in 2018, and captured the imagination of the popular press. There are even robots now that can observe what's actually in front of them and then draw it. But in general, other than the knowledge gained in building these systems, and the more general questions they raise about the human creativity, what role can these systems play in the development of both artistic practice and education? So can machines ever be creative? And is this really the right question? Many artists working in the field of computational creativity would argue that this is not a particularly interesting line of inquiry in relation to the role of computers in making art. Is there any point to the idea that we as artists could be superseded by machines in making art? And is it not more interesting perhaps to consider the idea that machines can amplify our capabilities and so discover new creative possibilities and connections? Roy Ascott has a view on the creative potential for an augmented relationship between ourselves and machines. It is a tool for the mind, an instrument for the magnification of thought, potentially an intelligence amplifier, the interaction of man, computer, in some creative endeavour involving the heightening of imaginative thought is to be expected. As early as 1970, the artists Stroud Cornuck and Ernest Edmonds argued in a paper called The Creative Process, where the artist is amplified or superseded by the computer for computers as amplifiers of human capabilities. If we focus on the idea of creativity as an end product, or what we would describe as the art object, then a machine may well supersede us in making art. However, as both Ascott and Edmonds maintain, It is the process of creativity that is important in human endeavour, and therefore it is these behavioural possibilities in the experience of machine learning that can play a part in both art practice and education. And because, as we are sentient beings, we learn through consciousness and our perception of things. So the focus should be on our interaction with machines and the creative process that this could foster. And this is what I hope to investigate in how we might think about the role that AI can play in developing a curriculum for art education. So how might this be achieved? Here are a few thoughts and ideas that I've started to explore this year based on the context that I've outlined so far. First, the idea of using AI as a learning facilitator, which is perhaps now a common research subject and is an area that can have an obvious impact on education in most subjects. It does, however, go well beyond what I want to discuss here, although its particular relevance to art and design education should not be underestimated, because the notion of personalised learning has always been at the heart of these subjects. However, I will focus on the following areas: developing AI literacy, thinking about AI as a creative collaborator, as a vehicle for social engagement, and looking into how artists could release the potential of AI. Enabling students to develop a broad and general understanding of AI literacy within their discipline could become required knowledge. Cynthia Brazel, the director of the Personal Robots Group of the MIT Labs, has produced a body of research on AI in education and firmly supports the view that now that many of these technologies are commonplace, we should really be starting to understand both how they work and their implications. She puts a particular emphasis on ethical AI and what has become known as AI bias, where the type of training sets used can have a negative impact on the end results, such as reinforcing gender and racial stereotypes or prejudice. I will certainly be discussing these social implications with my students. In art and design, almost without exception, students get taught digital imaging skills. Will it in the future become common practice to also develop AI imaging skills? My current students have just started using AI imaging applications such as Google's Deep Dream Generator to produce drawings and images about themselves, and then running this through the AI software. It is important that the students identify what they might gain or even lose in this image making process. One way of thinking about this is to look at the role that creating datasets can play in the collaboration between artist and machine. For example, the artist Anna Regler created a project that looks at how the Bitcoin market fluctuated. She drew the comparison between the current euphoria surrounding Bitcoins and the Dutch tulip mania of the 17th century. To do this, she wanted to train a machine learning AI to respond to data sets of tulips so that the appearance of a tulip on screen would be informed by the price of Bitcoins. Incredibly, for this project, she photographed and hand-labelled 10,000 tulips. This in itself became the artwork Myriad Tulips. And the Mosaic Virus was the finished video work of the collaboration. About the work, she said, "I think about what it can do, how it can add to what I'm making. What are the associations and connotations of using it? How can all these different things go in and help amplify or construct the message or the thing I'm interested in and make it conceptually stronger?" Creating data training sets is a good way of getting the students to collaborate with AI. For example, I'm currently running a student project that asks them to create data sets about themselves that could be used to train an AI system to recognise them, both with visual references and aspects to their personality. The data sets will include photographic self-portraits, objects and places that represent them, visual and audio clues about their emotions and feelings. And finally, they should also think about the response from the system to enable them to create new artworks and ideas for the use of AI. This is the first session in which we run this project, so only time will tell how successful the collaboration and engagement will be with the AI machine learning technologies. There's a general view in education that we learn better through social interaction and collaboration, so I'm interested in how we can use AI for peer learning and social engagement. Over the past few years, I've developed a workshop using cybernetic theories and ideas. Put simply, this is an organisational theory based on using feedback to create a sense of equilibrium and balance. It is a theoretical system of ideas that can be applied to many disciplines such as mathematics, computing, biology, business, and for our purposes in art. It is important to understand the role of cognition in working with these theories because ideas developed in cognitive science, by example for Noam Chomsky, put an emphasis on cognition as a complex mental state involving information, process, and feedback, all of which are encompassed by cybernetic theory. Therefore, I've developed a workshop on cybernetics that encourage social interaction between participants to create a system of feedback loops to develop a sense of emotional well-being in the user of this system. The three principles of the workshops are conversation and interaction. This should be embedded in the design stage of the stated outcome and inherent in the finished solution. Behavioural change through direct experience. Self-regulation through positive and negative feedback. I'd like to develop workshops further to incorporate the use of AI to support the feedback loop. As with any new technology, there are plenty of examples to suggest that it is when the artists become involved that a technology can truly be exploited as a medium. As Paul Heckel explained back in 1984 in his book Elements of Friendly Software Design, it was when the engineers lost control to the artists and the communication experts during film's infancy that technology moved from being a recording device to the medium that we know today. So to finish, I would suggest that AI needs artists and designers as much as they need AI. And it is our role as art educators to facilitate and make this happen.